Welcome to the We Hack Purple podcast, where each week we meet another amazing human being that is part of the information security industry. And we learn about them, we learn about their career progression, we learn about their job, we learn about how maybe you one day could be in their shoes. This week is sponsored by ThreadFix, which is powered by Denim Group, and I am so excited about that. I had a lot of chances this week at work to talk about ThreadFix. I am Tanya Janca, I am your host, and this week we have Zenobia Godschalk. And let's not wait, let's just meet her. Please bring out Zenobia. Hi.
Hi, Tanya, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good, thank you. What day is it today? Thursday.
It is Thursday. Did I say your name correctly?
I know
it's Zenobia. Oh,
yep.
good. Yes.
You
awesome.
Did. I had to practice Godschalk too when I got married, but yes, that's correct.
Awesome. So could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? And then I'm gonna, ask you 10,000 questions about your job.
Sure, I would love to. So nice to meet everyone. Zenobia Godschalk. I am the founder of ZAG Communications, which is a technology PR and marketing firm, mostly focused on cybersecurity. I'm also the head of communications for Hedera Hashgraph, which is a public distributed ledger. I have a lovely family, 2 crazy boys who keep me very busy, as well as, the husband and the boy dog. So as you can imagine, this house is chaos, and I have sworn them to silence while we record this.
Oh, that is awesome. Yes, I record this while everyone is out of the house. Go to the park and play, do whatever things you're going to do, because I know that there will be a mini human running and yes.
That's right.
Yes. and dogs are really they're like, I'm cute. I need the person on the other end of the camera to know, Zenobia. Don't hide your cute
and
dog.
Why did you close the door? I'm just going to scratch it until you either open it or I work my way right through it.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. Could you tell us a little bit at your job title and then a little bit about so you kind of have 2 jobs. Is it cool if we cover both?
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm going to give you a little bit of backstory and then it'll make more sense. So I started off work in Silicon Valley. I have a degree in economics and industrial engineering. And many, many moons ago, I started out work in the Valley during the first .com boom and bust. And I worked for Intel right out of school. And then for a number of startups, and then landing at a company called Loud Cloud, which became Opsware, a data center automation company. Throughout that journey, I started my career in finance, and at Intel, I had supported the PR team, which was this huge, amazing operation. I don't know if you remember, Intel Inside and the Intel Dads. There were so many parts to this, and I had no idea what PR was. And that was really my first introduction into the world of magic. And a great team there. I went on to do PR in my subsequent roles. And when I started at Loud Cloud, I was, the most junior person on the PR team. And when I left, I was running the group. And so PR means a lot of different things, right? It does mean working with the media. Over time, it's shifted into social media and internal communications and your owned channels of communication. So when I got married, we moved out to Atlanta. I didn't find any tech companies that I wanted to work for at the time. I took a very sort of sharp left turn, which I think, I went into investment banking. Most people make that mistake right out of college and just get it out of their systems. And I didn't do that. So almost immediately after taking the role, I regretted that life choice, but it did allow me to get exposure to the internet security industry. And so we covered public companies in the space. This is when ISS was standalone. This is when RSA was standalone. And so we covered those companies from the perspective of what is their stock worth and how do you value their stock based on how the business is doing. And I think that was a great sort of trial by fire. You had to learn so much about the security industry in such a short period of time. And I'm here in Atlanta. We were lucky that the ISS team is here. There have been a lot of companies that have grown out of that company. But after sort of paying my dues for a little while there, I realized I did not want to be in investment banking. And so originally I had just said, I'm going to do a little bit of consulting and, go back to doing PR. And over time that has grown into what today is ZAG Communications. And it is, so we do public relations, we do investor relations, we work with the media a lot. We end up working with customers all the way from, sort of their very, very initial messaging and how do I tell this story to the world, through, we're working with some, actually 2 companies right now that are in the process of going public. So it's fun to see customers at all places in their journey, and you find that they just need very different things along the way. And about, now it's been a few years. A few years ago, I started working with one startup that was in the blockchain and distributed ledger space, and the founding team's just amazing. And I thought, I was saying, Tanya, it felt like sort of the beginning of the internet all over again, right? It felt like that significant shift in computing and how people do things. So I took on a more full-time role with that company, which is a distributed ledger company called Hedera Hashgraph. And so I also run their communications. Over time that has also evolved into more of sort of advising the companies that build on top of the network too, because a network is just a network. The applications that run on top of it are really what, are sexy and make it sizzle and can tell great stories that people can actually get excited about.
Oh, that is such a wonderful story. I like it. I like too how you describe marketing, like how you help them begin to tell their story. I really like that way of explaining what marketing is, because I've seen lots of ways of marketing where I'm like, that makes me uncomfortable. And I like the idea of like, I'm trying to help them tell their story. I'm trying to help like their audience get to know them. I like that.
Well, and you see so many startups that have amazing technology, and they sort of have this we call it the field of dreams problem, right? They believe that if they build it, they will come. And in some cases, yes, by miracle, someone might discover it, but you hope to put your best foot forward, right? And you hope to explain to people, why did I do this? Why am I on this journey? Why did I feel like other people would need to have this problem solved too?
Nice. Yeah. Okay. So you sort of have 2 jobs. And so I'm probably going to ask a lot of the questions like kind of around the 2 jobs. And if it's the same answer, that's okay. But
yeah,
what is a day like in the life of your job?
Yeah, I know everybody says that, it's so different from day to day. And it really can be. I think at this point in my career, I have done everything that there is to do in the discipline or the domain of PR. So if you think about writing press releases, running awards programs, helping with speakers bureaus, developing content, pitching media, working with press, doing rapid response, those are sort of the domains in PR. And I feel like I've been now doing this long enough, and I have earned the white hairs that I do color a little bit purple, but you can barely see because they either just stay white or black. But that now my job is really to help my team and or my customers, or for example, on the Hedera side, the applications benefit from that knowledge. So I am no longer necessarily the doer, But, when we meet with the clients, I am in there helping them figure out their strategy that the team then says, okay, now I can go execute on that. Or can I run this release by you because I'm just not sure that the messaging is right? Or when we go to pitch this, do you think that's the right person that we should talk to at that publication? And then also thinking about things like, okay, if you are, for example, going through the IPO process, there are certain things that you can and can't do from a PR perspective, throughout that time. How do you plan out your, we had a conversation today about how do you plan out your announcement schedule? We had another conversation with a client about, okay, there are some unknown things that may or may not happen in the industry. Could you time some of your things to go with that? This morning I spoke on a panel with, some colleagues in Europe. And I would say if you had asked me over a year ago, a big part of my job was travel and go do these things and go speak or go launch this thing in this country. And now it's like, go downstairs and launch that from your, from your office, because that's what you can do. So, I certainly, there's parts of me that say, gosh, like doing a launch in Korea was amazing. And, having someone on stage at Web Summit in Portugal was phenomenal. But, but it also takes its toll on you.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. In 2019, I calculated it, and you have to be in Canada at least 6 months of the year to get health insurance. And in 2019, I calculated it. I'm like, oh, I should have lost my health insurance by 2 months, because that's how long I was out of the country. And I'm like, that sucks.
Right. And when you take a step back and it's no longer, the norm or required, you go, wait a minute, that is insane. So we'll see what it looks like going forward, right? How do we balance that and not go crazy one way or the other?
Yeah, I'm really hopeful that we're going to find kind of a hybrid of things. Isn't it amazing how you can watch a panel happening around the world from your desk, and it's not quite as good as being there, but it's but it's kind of awesome because I wouldn't be able to afford to go to this conference perhaps, or just it wouldn't work for me because I have to be at work and I can't just miss a week because there's this really cool thing happening. And yeah, the opportunities are, who would have thought, right?
Yeah.
Giant pandemic, but lots of new ways of life, but some of them are kind of good.
Yeah, some silver linings for sure. I mean, I remember, I was the mom calling from a New York, hotel lobby, trying to conference into my kids' parent-teacher conference. And they were like, this is just really weird. You shouldn't do it. Not you shouldn't do it, but don't worry about it. And this year it was all conferences are on Zoom. So parents who either, families are split up and they don't live together, or, parents are out or working, that has now become the norm there. And, I think that's a benefit.
Do you feel like a lot of areas where I'm totally off topic, but areas where previously they're oh, well, it would be too much work to make a video conference for that, but now they're forced to do it, and it's it wasn't that hard, was it? You could have let me call in from New York so I could attend this and participate in my child's education. It wasn't that hard, was it?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, I think those platforms have been forced to, and we've been lucky. We've worked with some creative agencies who I think either were thinking about this already beforehand or had a little bit of experience with it beforehand, but they have been on it, right? I mean, the events industry was decimated. And so for those who were able to pivot fast, we had a partner that we worked with, and, they basically then ended up putting virtual speaker kits together, right? So every speaker got, a camera, a green screen, a mic, all those things that you need, and they were ready to go. And yes, there's an initial cost to doing that, but they were able to turn around these events where you're that's gorgeous. That, first of all, those are not just those people in their house. I don't believe that, but also it's something you wanted to watch.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Awesome. I agree. Okay, so I have one more off-topic question, and then I swear I'll get back to the
Sure.
script, like probably. So you are marketing cybersecurity companies and kind of helping them tell their story. There's so many different ways. Like you can do those creepy trackers on the internet, or you can, like do content-based marketing, or you could do like a giant email list or whatever. Like, how do you choose? Like, if you have a client, are you like, I'm going to try a little bit of everything and see what sticks, and then like give, like, sorry, I keep saying giver. So that's like Canadian for, and then you just do a lot of that. Um,
Okay. I think, so the nice part about marketing is that marketing has become much more measurable over the past, decade or so. So you are able to do more of that A/B testing and say, this worked, that didn't work, and that's
yeah.
across campaigns, that's across social media, that's across readership of things. I think that things have changed. So people now don't want to talk to someone until they've already done like 90% of their research. So you have a very educated audience. You have an audience that has a pretty low tolerance for BS. So you really have to say, look, our marketing can't be, that's why, an agency like ours doesn't also do consumer marketing, right? Because the message that you're giving is very, very different, and it has to be rooted in a lot more credibility. I think there's a lot more rigor and scrutiny around, are we putting this out, and how is that going to be received, and how credible is it? I think we all know the company that a few years ago was like, our solutions are better because we use math. And it's like, well, God, I hope so. Like, what solution doesn't use math? You're a cybersecurity company. Let's.
Yes.
But, so I think that the buyer today does not want to be, yes, they want some of that. They want the comfort of, this is just going to work great and it's going to be slick, and they want it, to have the brand halo around it. But this is an area where you really have to say, how do I reach them in a way that's very, very credible? And, how do I put sort of equal experts in front of them to help them either answer their questions or give that credibility? So whereas you used to be able to say, like, let's get everybody in a room and do this, I think you've seen a shift to, okay, let's either build out these communities, or let's do it in a way where we're putting forward our most credible experts so that they are kind of building that trust quickly so you can get to the rest of it.
Because our industry is really competitive. Like I was looking it up. So We Hack Purple has made it into a contest for startups.
Very exciting.
New ventures. I know, it's so exciting. So we've made it like past round 1 and into round 2, and there's 4 rounds, so there's still a ways off. But they were like, what is the entire, like, how much is your industry worth? I'm like, oh, cybersecurity. I'm like looking it up. I'm like, oh, 153 billion. Okay, yeah. And then the training alone is 1.5 billion dollars in 2021 expected to be spent. And I was like,
yeah.
And I'd never looked this up before. I was just like, I love AppSec and I'm going to just keep doing it. And if people will give me money, that's great. But like looking this up, like, you are competing. Someone was saying, why don't you buy advertising, Tanya? And I'm like, did you know that a Google AdWord for application security training is $300 a click?
Wow. I did not know that.
It used to be $300, and then another time we checked and it was $140 a click. But that's insane.
Yeah.
And so you are trying to compete in like a very fierce market. I'm impressed.
And these are aggressive companies, right? But to your point, I think when I started at Morgan Keegan, we did a huge report on that covered as many startups as we could find, essentially, in security. And at the time, it was like 750. And I think if you look at like the RSA show floor, not that that's a perfect comparison, but it's at least 3,500. So I think you either have to sort of find your niche and really go after it. And then, it is sort of the classic crossing the chasm, right? Can you find it in one area? Can you do a great job on that? And can you then spread that to other areas? But, you do see it's still about what people trust, especially in this industry. So you see things like the ISACs do well because there is that, referral base, or I've used it. And so, you should use it too.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so very briefly, I'm going to thank our sponsor, ThreadFix, who make the most stupendous vulnerability management system this side of the galaxy. I'm also going to announce that season 1 of We Hack Purple podcast ends on August 19th or 18th, 19th. That will be our last show for a few weeks before we start season 2, where we're going to change from finding your career in InfoSec to a new topic of teach me some security stuff, which I realize is not that clear yet, but don't worry, it will be. Also, I wanted to just say that I bought the InfoSec Unplugged hoodie from Davin Jackson, and that guy rules, and he was previously on our podcast, and you should check it out. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about that's totally off topic before I can ask Zenobia like 4,000 more questions is the Vancouver International Privacy and Security Summit is May 5th to May 7th. And I'm one of the keynotes, and We Hack Purple is sponsoring, and we're a very proud sponsor. And every person on the entire internet should buy tickets because they're great. The end. That was lots of me being off topic. So my marketing team gets frustrated with me, but I have checked every box now. Yes. So you are in a really fierce market. What types of personality traits do you think someone needs to be good at your job? So you're a CEO, but you're also like an expert at PR and just like handling when incident response happens and being like clear in a crisis and stuff. Like this is a lot. Like what types of personality traits or maybe aptitudes would make someone good at this?
Yeah, it's funny. Every year PR gets ranked as one of the most stressful jobs. I know saying that to a group of info security people is like, really? But there is sort of a constant pressure in terms of, the things that you're trying to figure out are, do I give this news an exclusive to someone? Will they leak it? Is this confidential? You're dealing with a lot of, as probably from working with some of the PR teams, you're dealing with a lot of crises. And so I think, being able to step back and say, okay, some things, few things are the end of the world, right? A lot of things are going to be, I have that little square of what is urgent and important on next to my computer. So that I try to remember, okay, what are the things that are really urgent and important? What are the things where we just need to take a step back and say, okay, let's calm down. Let's not rush to do something, both in the very immediate term, but also, you see people say like, I want to get on this bandwagon. I want to get on that bandwagon. And, trying to get people back to their vision and their mission so that they don't dilute it by sort of hopping on the latest trends. And then, as a CEO, I think it is, so I'm lucky. My dad was also an entrepreneur. He started a business with his two of his closest friends. And one of the things he always said to me was, Zenobia, the hardest part of your job will be managing people. And sometimes he said it in more colorful language than that, but but essentially, people are people. And I think you've really seen this last year. People are are the full expression of their personality right now, whatever that might be, right? They're not like quite the happy drunk versus the mad drunk, but they're on edge. They are doing their best. People, you've spent a lot of time with the same people probably over the past year. And so, I think part of my job is to kind of just play peacemaker and to interject humor and to try to get people all saying, okay, let's make sure we're focused. externally and on some of our shared goals, so that we don't, not that you don't want to look internally, but so that you don't have any sort of unnecessary internal bickering.
Way back, I was a CISO for a while, and we had security incidents, and I remember being in the room with all these executives, and they're like, so what happened today? And I was like, oh, someone went to our website and then clicked, like they went to the French version of our website, and then Google Translate was like, do you want to translate this page to English? And the person said yes. And then French English is not always super accurate with Google Translate. And so it was asking them, which gender are you, male or female? But instead, in the word femme in French is also wife. So are you a man or are you a wife? Oh. And then it asked something else that was also a poor translation. And so then they took a screenshot and were trying to shame us on social media for being sexist a-holes. And they're like, they're like, did this person attack our website? I'm like, no, this person, I read her Twitter, she's definitely not smart enough to cross the street. And they're like, well, we need a response. We need you to help us write a thing. And I was like, okay, so dear so-and-so, I am sorry that you are not smart enough to use the internet. Your life must be extremely complex. And they're just like, get out. Just go back to your dungeon with IT security and get out of here, you suck. And so I've always had this admiration for people that can craft, that have the patience and know how to craft a message. So they came up with something that sounded really good, but I was just just tell her she's an a-hole and block her. And they're like, okay, so you have to go back to the dungeon on whatever floor I worked on. And I was like, okay. And they're all just but I mean I was like, dude, my team solved this incident in 14 minutes. We rule. Yeah. And they're just get out. Right. And so we're all good at different things. I'm not good at that. You're very good at that. How does someone learn how to be good at that? Or what personality trait? I know you've already said a bunch, but I feel this is magic. Really.
Well, I mean, I do think, you have to compartmentalize a bit, right? You can be sort of nodding your head and saying okay, well, that's crazy. But I'm going to take that into account and then put all those pieces together and see what's the least crazy, most palatable thing that we can come up with. It really is sort of, I do feel when I had children, I was aha, okay, I don't know if I've already been doing this or they're making me do it more, but it's sort of okay, yes, and how do we shift you over to this, this other message or this slightly other story? But yes, again, it is sort of it's the maybe not necessarily peacemaker, but it is saying, okay, all of these points are valid. How do we just convey that in a way that is not going to set off alarm bells for all these other things that we know are happening in the world, right? So yes, a big part of our job is communicating the customer story, but just as much of it is knowing what's happening in the industry so we can say to the customer, that's a really bad idea and here's why. And I think, maybe it's as a woman, maybe not, but I always feel I need to come prepared to those conversations with 27 data points. And so I probably do that more often, right? You think this is a very good idea. I'm going to show you all the reasons why it's very much not a good idea. And then you can, you're not just listening to my opinion, it's backed up by, 27 examples.
I love it. I love using data to prove. I love it. Okay, I have more questions. So,
all right.
What technical skills do you think someone needs to do your job? Because I feel if you can't understand any of the products that you're marketing, you're not going to be able to tell their story well. And then I want to kind of combine that question with, is there any training that can teach you how to know those technical skills? Because I feel you must have a lot in your brain.
So many things that that should not be shared with the outside world. But In terms of, so when I started at Morgan Keegan, I had a great boss who was basically like, you're very smart. You understand infrastructure. You don't understand security. Here's like 3 books on security. Like, go read them. And I was like, okay, this is a lot. Like, there's a stack and there's these layers, but over time you realize I should know enough to be dangerous. I should know enough to have the conversation with the engineers, but I should not know so much that I love this the way they love it. Because when I do that, then I stop being able to tell the bigger story, and I stop being able to abstract that out and keep pushing them on the why, more high level, simpler, no one's going to get it, especially if you're creating a new category. You've got to be able to up level that. So from that side, no technical training where I needed to go get, a certification or anything, but certainly some reading up on, understand, the basics of, understand the basics of enterprise IT, understand the basics of, security architecture. I think the most interesting thing to me is, I don't know how else to say this. Learn to be a good writer. Learn to be articulate and concise, because there are too many people who either think that they can get away with, because they're so smart technically, like, I'm just going to spew all this at you, or, they think, well, I'm going to make it flowerier and bigger, and I'm just going to use these buzzwords, and that's also going to do it. And so I think, if anything, learning how to write a persuasive argument, whether that's in a release or a blog or an email, right? You are always pitching and always trying to sell media on, this is why this is a great story. Whether that's, in a media pitch directly to them, or an award program, or anything else, persuasive writing is what you have to do, right? You have to be able to articulate, why do I care? You have to draw them in very quickly. We always say you have 3 seconds. So if your first line of your email doesn't catch them, that you're out. And, you're getting this sort of, sometimes you're getting great stuff. Sometimes you're getting very complicated things, that you're like, wait, I have this amazing, vulnerability that you need to know about, but I've got to tell you 7 layers down where it, how it works. But I need you to be interested in the first sentence.
I love that. Do you think that if someone can learn that skill, that's probably just awesome for their whole life? Like, it can improve everything?
Yeah. Think how many people in your life you want to do other things for you.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. I have a lot of friends trying to convince their parents to go get vaccines right now. And like, some of them resort to, we're going to the mall, and putting their parent in the car and just driving for the vaccine. Like, yeah, I'm lucky my parents are not like that. They're like, I'm first in line. Right. But a lot of people I know are struggling with those things. And so the persuasion that is a good life skill, we'll call it. Not a soft skill, life skill.
Yeah.
I have more questions. So
all right.
Let's say someone wants to move towards what you're doing, right? So someone's like, I'm super interested in marketing, I'm super interested in cyber, and they don't know where to start. Like, what types of work experience could they try to get that might help them, like, one day walk in similar shoes to yours?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, so, as much as this industry is challenging, I do feel like it's also quite welcoming. And so, so on the vendor side, there are certainly a number of companies that you could look at, and there are tons of places that will have big marketing organizations where you can go and sort of learn all of the different parts of marketing. I will say, having some subject matter expertise, and then also being a great writer, you're going to be able to do a lot of things in marketing. You're going to be able to do product marketing. You're going to be able to do partner marketing. You're going to be able to do any of the different pieces of marketing that, that make up the machine. So, I think making sure that if you wanted to do it on your own, starting to think about, are you blogging, or are you writing thoughts down, or are you, on your LinkedIn writing, a few articulate paragraphs on, what you think about, pick the incident of the week that happened. There are so many, recruiters and people looking for folks who, who are smart and have an interest in this area, that they could get into it. And then I think, most marketing disciplines, it's not like, well, if you're, this kind of engineer, it's harder to switch over here. With marketing, you end up being pulled into a lot of the other things. So once you're part of a marketing team, you get to see what other people are doing, and they're most likely not going to say, no, I don't need the help, right?
Yes. This semester we hired a marketing student who I swear, like, she's going to be prime minister next year. She's so amazing. She's so persuasive. I'm just like, you're going to rule the world and you're like 20. but like, people that are persuasive, people that can communicate in a way that sways you, that motivates you, that I'm just like, whoa. Yeah, writing her performance review, it was like, this is the second coming of Jesus. And
I
love
that.
I know. I was just like, can I have hearts come out of the picture and then like put a crown on her? Like, I was just like, oh. Yeah. Yeah, the marketing director was just like, I'm going to mourn her loss.
Yeah.
And we have a new student coming, and I'm sure we're going to love the new student, but it's hard to say goodbye. And like, she's just, yeah, I'm sure at some point she'll work for you. Okay, so I have more questions. So the cheese question. So
okay.
every episode we talk about, like, does your job pay well? Because so I am in just past the 1-year anniversary of startup land, and I get paid minimum wage right now, but I own a company, and that is awesome. And like, we're working up to it. I'm gonna get a raise. I'm gonna be like just a little bit above minimum wage soon. But your company is doing well. And so does your work pay well? Does that field pay well? Does being a CEO of a giant company that is kicking all the asses pay well, etc.?
Yeah. So I'm going to segment it out into a few different ways to think about it. I think if you think about PR, PR in general can run the gamut. And so it really depends on what industry you're in. So for an industry where there is a lot of interest and there's not a lot of technical demand, like if you wanted to go do PR for a celebrity or a sports, an athlete or something like that, there's 500 other people who want that job. So that doesn't pay super well unless you're sort of at the, the upper echelon. For technology PR, it actually does pay pretty well because it's a different skill set. You're trying to communicate a different set of ideas. And to your point, in info security, there's a lot of companies. And so a growing field, rising tide lifts all boats. So I would say overall, PR does pay well. Let me get back to the equity versus cash piece in a minute. Being the CEO of a company, there is risk. You're responsible for payroll every month. You're responsible for collections every month. You're responsible for that entire chain. But there is reward as well. And, I think that those two go hand in hand. And so, there's many things that you do, right, as a business owner to make sure that you've put yourself in a good position and your employees in a good position. And then, you just keep doing it, right? You keep growing and you keep, and then one day you turn around and you're like, how did this happen? Like you've done it, and and to the outside world it looks like, oh yeah, like they started a company, of course, but inside you're like, no, I ground away for all those years, and like, yes, that is why I'm reaping those rewards. Yeah. Now
it's hard work. It's hard work.
Yeah. It's so funny to me because people are like, how often do you work in your pajamas? I'm like, 0. 0 days I work in my pajamas, never. Like I am in my office, I have the door locked when the kids come home from school. Like, you do the work day in and day out. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I need a lock.
Well, they figure out how to jig it too. So I'm like, it's locked. And they're like, but I can open it. I'm like, but that's not the point. The point is it's locked.
I'm so glad that the children only ever watch the first 2 to 3 minutes of the podcast, because then they get bored. And then they're not like, hey, you lock the door?
Right. But I do want to hit on a point. I know we briefly discussed this, which is, if you are looking at a job offer for a company that offers equity stock, whether that's a private company, VC backed, or whether that's a public company, really take that into consideration and really think about it at every point in your career, because you are going to have to make that choice of some companies offer more cash compensation, some offer a bigger equity piece, but you need to know how to value that, because that can set you on a very different trajectory for the rest of your career if it's the right company and the right stock package. And, I find, especially with women, but even with very smart people on, who've done amazing things, they don't think about that in the way that the investors think about that and in the way that management thinks about that. And so in the end, they may end up with a great job that pays well, but it doesn't have that equity component that maybe they should have asked for. So, I know we've talked a lot in some of our women leadership groups about how do you make sure that next generation knows, you need to ask what percentage of the company this is, right? What does the stock represent? What does the cap table look like? What am I really getting for my contribution? Because, 5,000 shares can sound big or small, or, 100,000 shares can sound big or small, but that's really like, if you don't know whether it's denominated in pesos or dollars, like, you need to understand the rest of the math around that.
Yeah. I remember working somewhere once and finding out I made significantly less than everyone else on my team. And so I asked for a raise. And by asked for, I mean, I said like, WTF? I'm the senior person on this team. I should have the senior pay. And so then they gave me $100,000 worth of stocks over 4 years. I'm like, so this is $25,000 of funny potential money per year that may be less next year. Maybe. And P.S. you pay me way less than less than $25,000, or you pay me. The difference was bigger than that, and so they're like, "Oh, this is a reward because you did something well." I'm like, "Is this in lieu of paying me properly for the work I perform?" And they were like, "No," and I was like, "Good, then I accept and I will sign the letter." But you're still going to correct my pay. And they're like, yes, ma'am. And I did end up resigning over it because they didn't correct it. But all these women I know are like, you should go in and like throw tables, or I'm like, no, I don't do that. I'm really gentle. But they're like, you need to demand what you're worth, right? And sometimes you win that and sometimes you lose that. And like, I lost that battle / I make more money now.
And I do think it's easier to do it right up front, right? It's easier to do it at the beginning when you're not vested. That's not sort of your family and friends already. You haven't been there a number of years.
Yeah.
So having that conversation up front, then you at least have the choice as to whether I take that job or I don't, knowing, what you're walking into.
Yes. And I really like websites like Glassdoor or Glassdoor. There's like a few of them where they'll tell you like, and like I've had a lot of weird jobs, like AppSec engineer is like a pretty weird, it's like a lot more obscure than some of the other jobs that are out there. But being able to look up like other people that live in your city that do this type of job, range from here to here. And if you're like, oh, I'm here, or oh, I'm here, right? Like it helps you negotiate better. One of my cousins actually called me and we were talking about this, and he went to work and asked other people where he worked how much money he made, because he knew that I was asking about it, and like employers tell you not to. So I'm very, like, I was like, I already know I'm like the key point of this team, and if I leave it'll be like really disastrous. So I just put in Slack, I make this much money and I think that I'm being mispaid. Who wants to talk offline about this? And my manager was so pissed. And I was like, what are you going to do? Fire me? We both know that can never happen. And so he went into work and he actually found out that he was making $50,000, $60,000 less than everyone else on his team, because he'd come in as a co-op student. Yeah. But then he'd worked there 4 years and he'd got these little raises. But he's like, no, like now I'm an intermediate whatever. And like, because they've been giving him these little raises, and his boss was like, you should go and do job like interviews and get job offers. And so he did. And then he got an offer for like $50,000, $60,000 above what he was making. And he's like, oh my God, what do I do? And I was like, tell your boss.
Right.
And so he told his boss, and his boss was like, I'll give you some equity. I'm going to give you an extra week's vacation, and I'm going to give you a $30,000 raise. And he's like, is this happening?
Right.
And he got it. And he like, let's just say there was like on our family Zoom call, there's like a little party, and like there was some dancing. And like,
I mean, if you think about most companies, they're either, if they're a public company, they're reporting their bottom line, or if they're a venture-backed company, they have a certain cash runway. So it's not necessarily in their incentive to bring it up. It's in their incentive to get the best talent for the lowest price, right? So, I think the more that and also just the more that you have that conversation, and the more that you talk about money and compensation and wealth and all those kinds of things, the more it just becomes comfortable. So I think starting to practice that early in your career, then not only are you comfortable with it, but you indicate to that employer that you know what you're talking about there, and that is important to you, and that they need to recognize that.
Yes. Yeah. And different people feel valued at work in different ways. And quite frankly, if someone compliments my work a lot, I get ridiculously excited and I love working for that person. But finding out that you make less money than your peers, and especially people 2 levels below you, is enough to make people angry. And so what had happened in my situation was, because I lived in Canada and the other people lived in America. And I know that a lot of people listening are going to say, oh, that's because of the Canadian dollar versus the American dollar. No. This was you're being paid 2/3 of all of and even if you translate the value, it was still significant, like way lower. They're like, oh, but that's how much Canadians get paid. And I was like, what now? Yeah. And they're like, well, if someone was in Bangladesh or in India, we're not going to pay them the same amount. And I was like, right. I made some faces. There was a lot of serious eyebrow movement. This is how Canadians admonish people. It's just like, there's some duck face. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no throwing Tim Hortons. What are they called? The donut hole?
Timbits.
Timbits, yeah.
Yeah, we're serious about those. Yep. I was giving training this morning and we were talking about tabletop exercises, and I was like, yeah, like we used to do these tabletop exercises, and one of the emergencies was that Tim Hortons, all of them were closed and none of us could get coffee, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, panic in the street. Because if you can't make fun of Canada, what do you even do, right? Okay, I have seriously difficult questions now.
All right.
So this is a combo question, Zenobia.
Okay.
What do you like best and what do you like least about your job? It's very serious.
Yes. Yeah. Um, I feel very lucky. I have a group of hysterical women that I work with. We've allowed in a couple men, but the Slack random channel in our company is, I mean, you would die. It's so funny. These women they're smart, and a lot of them are moms, and so we just get stuff done. But then they're also just a constant stream of of the memes and the people and the dealing with things, and so it is really fun. And I think on the other hand, we're very lucky as a PR agency. We've had some of our clients since we started ZAG, which is actually quite unusual. And so we've been blessed with clients who come back to us, or the company, changes forms and they stay with us. And so those relationships are just, now some of them are going on 10, 15 years. And I think that's pretty remarkable. I think it's been really fun to sort of see that community grow up, to really feel like you are, like you're a part of it. I think as I get older, I have less tolerance for, I have less tolerance for some of the mansplaining that happens in some of these industries. Security is quite bad. Blockchain could conceivably be the only industry that's worse. So, there are definitely a number of people who want to tell you how much they know. There's been a lot of wealth creation in that industry. They want to measure themselves by that. Those kinds of things I just don't have a tolerance for. I think we're creating something. We're bringing something to market that's amazing. We're going to talk about the technology. We're going to stay humble. We're going to focus on that side of it. And, and for the people who want to, tell me how important they are or how much they know, usually it's just a few sentences that then sort of set them back in the right place.
Yeah, I love that. I saw on Twitter, a woman said, she's like, yeah, I have so many dates lined up. I put in my thing, so I live in San Francisco, and I'm really looking for a man to explain blockchain to me. She's like, I had 1,000 messages the next morning. She's like, I'm going to get laid.
Oh my God.
I'm like, so
yeah,
that's awesome.
That is a social experiment right there. Yeah, I hope she documented all of that.
Yes. There was another woman that posted that she posted about the what's it called, like the coup that happened, or the attempted coup in America, and she was like, yeah, that's really cool, on a dating site. And then men were saying, oh, I was there, and she's like, pics or it didn't happen. And then she's been sending them to the FBI.
That's right. Yeah. I love
and
that.
I was like, you won the internet, lady. You have won the internet.
That's right. I had a CTO who used to say the biggest problem is always that there is a carbon-based life form at the other end. So yes, feed their ego, and here's what you get.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to take a first actionable step to try to follow in your footsteps, do you have, like, it could be 1 or 2 steps or 3, but like, what would you do? What would you tell Zenobia from 15 years ago?
Sure. Gosh, so many things, but one's related to work. I would say, so 2 things. On the PR side, get that writing straight. Just start to write, start to educate yourself on the industry that you want to be a part of. There's so much information out there. If you want to be a part of info security, there's a ton of information. You can figure out who are, the big companies, who are the big VCs. And then, if you are posting some of your stuff and your content on LinkedIn, people will find you because there is such a need in security. I would say if you want to run, an agency, if you want to run a business, make sure you know that stuff. right? Make sure you know all the boring stuff. Make sure you know finance, make sure you know accounting, make sure you know, you understand the receivables process, make sure you know billing, all those things that you're like, I wish it would just, magically happen. But you need to be able to have those conversations with clients, right? You need to be able to talk about pricing with them. You need to be able to, work through their legal departments and their finance departments. And, you are running the business. You are the face of it. You are the main pitch man. You're the main salesman. But you are also, you have to have that double check on your back end and on your, on what's happening. You got to keep that house in order.
Yes. I literally took a class last week about how to protect my intellectual property because I was like, I need to know the difference between a trademark and a trade secret and copyright versus, Oh yeah. And now I'm like, should I be copywriting the name of my company and my Twitter handle, or should I not? Because or trademarking,
Yeah.
So lots of food for thought from lawyers and money. Anyway.
Yeah, you have to have that attention to detail, right? Like it's not. It can be glitzy and glam and super fun, and but it is also devil is in the details, and you got to make sure that ship is run tight, and that your employees are getting what they need, your customers are getting what they need, and all of that is super, super attention to detail.
Yeah. Yes. Oh my gosh, that's such good advice. Okay, so if people want to follow you or know more about you, how can they do this?
Yep, I am at Zenobia ZAG on Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure I'm the only Zenobia Godschalk on there. So either of those places. And then zagcommunications.com or hedera.com, HEDERA. Nice. And, would love to connect on LinkedIn, and you can humor me on Twitter.
Oh my God, I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show. This was so
Thank you.
I'm enlightened now. This was so helpful. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. You've been a pleasure.
Thank you, Tanya.
Okay.
Pleasure is all mine.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Bye. Thank you for listening to the We Hack Purple podcast, where each week we meet an incredibly interesting, intelligent, and amazing human being from the information security industry like Zenobia Godschalk. Gosh, she was awesome. This episode was sponsored by ThreadFix, powered by Denim Group. I want to thank all of you for listening and watching. I want to humbly suggest you consider, if you're not already, subscribing on our YouTube channel, clicking that awesome like button. If you are listening on a podcast app, you can go and you can review our podcast. We would love it if you review our podcast. Even if you say we're only okay, if you send us a message on social media, we will mail you stickers. Yes, that is right. I am offering to bribe you in order for you to give us a review. I want to thank my guest. Gosh, she was so amazing. I learned a lot. And with that, I want to ask you to tune in next week. Oh, also one last thing. Sign up for our newsletter. newsletter.wehackpurple.com. We have a brand new course coming out really soon on secure coding. I'm super excited. And thank you again for listening. I will see you next week.